Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. Join me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, for real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and masculine, you learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
Together, working at a practical level, you'll learn to trust that everything that is happening is for you, your growth, and ultimate freedom.
Our circumstances don't matter. It's only how we relate to them that does.
Get ready to befriend the wisdom of your body and the power of your mind.
Break Free and Trust starts now.
Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jacqueline. And in today's episode, we're going to explore the meaning of the word teacher and how we've been taught over time to seek outside of ourselves what we can only truly access by looking inward. In our lives, both you and I find ourselves in the seat of guide, teacher, mentor, sponsor, or some mix of these words. And yet our paths getting here are very different, as are the meanings the words themselves hold for us. I am super excited about this conversation because this is something that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of what does it actually mean to be a teacher and what is a teacher, etc. in our world. And I think maybe the way to begin might be I'm going to ask you a question. It seems to me that right now the need for spiritual teachers is greater now than it's ever been. And I'd love to ask you why you think that is.
Ooh, we're coming right out of the gates there. That's a big question. Okay, that's not what I was expecting. I'm going to start from a spiritual perspective on this, and then I'm going to work our way down. Astrologically, we are entering the age of Aquarius from the age of Pisces. Now, in the yoga traditions, which you and I both subscribe to some extent, prophesized what would transpire during those transitions thousands of years ago. And what's fascinating is they talked about the age of Pisces that's been going on for about over 2,000 years now, was going to be the age of information. And what that means is whoever had the information, whoever controlled the information, could collect it and own it, would have all the power. And so there was a tremendous amount of thrust for people getting and collecting information. And it sort of played out that way. What's so interesting is the age of Aquarius, the prophecy or the forecast was that there would be an overload of information. In fact, by the time the age of Aquarius came around, there'd be so much information that our central nervous systems wouldn't be able to process it anymore. We wouldn't be able to distinguish between right and wrong, true from false, because there'd be so much information bombarding us. And what would be required in the age of Aquarius is not having information, but it's having discernment with that information. And it's amazing to look around with what's happening with multiple media sources, social media, now AI coming on, what feels like there's multiple psychological operations going on at any time. There are various groups of people that are looking at the same set of data and having completely different interpretations of what that means. There's some issues where we can't agree on what's true and what's false. That's playing out for us real time. And what the Aquarian age, or what the yogis said, is in the Aquarian age, those who would survive and those who would lead us out of it were those who would develop their discernment. And what they meant with that is being able to turn off the information altogether and go inside and connect to the divine, the field of universal consciousness, whatever is ultimate truth and ultimate reality, and use that as their guidepost to determine what the truth is and what the path forward was. And those would be the spiritual teachers of the Aquarian age that would then pull humanity into the next stage of their evolution. And so that's effectively why we need spiritual teachers more now than ever. The yogis predicted this 2,000 years ago. Would you add anything to that?
Yeah. Well, I might dumb it down a little bit so that I can understand it. But I think what I would add to it is that what we're really being asked to do at this time is to go inside and be able to actually develop our intuition. So that ability to discern comes from our ability to turn inside and actually tap into what our intuition is telling us is truth versus what the media and everything out there is telling us to believe. And I think in the presence of the craziness, not just with information, but in terms of even the political climate right now, to be able to tap in and to know what feels right and what's aligned for me is more important than what I'm being told is right out there. You know, the whole idea, it's interesting, like the whole idea of education has really been turned on its head on some levels for me over the last number of years. And a piece of that is, you know, when I grew up, when I was taught by my teacher, I was taught what I believed was truth. I didn't question whether I was getting accurate information or inaccurate information about history or geography or politics. I was meant to sit down and absorb what my teacher was teaching me. And that's actually no longer accurate. Right now, within the climate of so much information coming our way and so many different opinions about the same information coming our way, it's incumbent upon us as adults, and then it's incumbent upon us as adults to help teach our children how to be able to critically think, as you so often talk about, and then tap into, well, what aligns with what feels right to me? Because that might not be what feels right to my neighbor or my partner or my friend, but I need to be able to tap into what's true for me. Was that land for you?
It does land, and it just again it reminds me of like one of the most famous philosophical quotes of all time from Socrates is that I know nothing, and I'm not even sure I know that, which is really like the ultimate pinnacle of the spiritual teacher to recognize. Hold on a second, I can't be confident of any of this information I'm given, so I need to try. I need to develop my intuition as my guiding light.
Yeah. So I know that this might be a little bit jarring for you, but well, maybe not jarring is the right word. I see you as a spiritual teacher. Do you see yourself that way?
Oh man, I want to say no,
I know.
but I know that's not true because I've trapped myself now in how I defined a spiritual teacher is that it's and we've defined it as someone who's going inside and connecting with their discernment. That is effectively what I've been focused on for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's what I teach. It's what I guide people towards. It is what I do. I would call myself I want to stop myself and recognize I'm a student of it more than anything else. But as time's gone on, have become a teacher, and I would say a spiritual teacher, but a teacher of consciousness. And I find myself in this role of working with people from in all different capacities to broaden their conscious view of the world and reality and connect with that inner light within them. Yeah, that is what I'm a spiritual teacher in that sense.
Well, I have to say, it's really nice to hear you step in and own that role because I watch you, or I get to witness you take on that role for so many. And yeah, it makes my heart feel good to know that you can own it. Um, I'm curious, love, who are the people that you look to as teachers?
Mm, yeah, interesting question. Yeah, and in my answer, it may seem strange because many of the people I see as my spiritual teachers have passed a long time ago. Um, Spiritual teachers are also are can be books or scripture. Some of the spiritual teachers are people that are alive that I've never met. And I've had some that have come and gone in my life that I've had relationships with, but there's sort of a main group that have sort of have been my guiding light in terms of this journey. And they would be, some of the ones I'd be more familiar with would be, for instance, if I see Jesus as a spiritual teacher, um, I see Guru Nanak from the Sikh tradition as a spiritual teacher, Yogi Bhajan, um, Bill Wilson, the creator of Alcoholics Anonymous and the writer of the Big Book, is a spiritual teacher, as are folks like Carl Jung. Um, yeah, these are the people I see as spiritual teachers in my life.
And what makes them spiritual teachers for you?
Mm.
What's the thread that holds them together or connects them?
They all these people and all these spiritual books have the thing when I'm thinking about one thing they have in common is to have a vibrational frequency that they exude. And they're teaching from this place. They're transmitting this consciousness. They're infused with it. And when you look at their teachings and you listen to their words, they are so deep and they're coming from a different place that's beyond the ego. It's beyond normal conversation. And for whatever reason, I can feel it. I can feel the vibration of their words and of their teachings and of their writing in my psyche. And that's what all these folks have in common. And that's what I've gravitated towards in the past several years. An example would be something like a really simple one, like the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a spirit. It's my mind. It's a spiritual book. It's been channeled somehow. When Bill Wilson wrote that, he wasn't writing from his ego. He was channeling a source of information that was deep within inside him that's available to all of us and put it down in writing. Every time I read that book, and I've read it so many times, I connect with it at a deeper level. And it's relating to I'm relating to the book, and the book's relating to me in the sense as my consciousness increase, what I get out of the book changes as well. And there's this analogy. It's like I'm digging for diamonds, and at the surface I find a few, but as I keep digging, the bigger and bigger diamonds are below. And so that's what all these teachers and books and whatnot have in common is this vibrational frequency of consciousness that then lifts me up and allows me to not only see the world differently, but to see myself from a different perspective. It allows me to, it's like almost like I can see myself in a mirror and I can see the parts of me that were hidden. And each and every time I do that, by going deeper with these spiritual teachers, I see a new part of me and it transforms me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's beautiful because it actually, in a lot of ways, what you're speaking to is that the teaching themselves, the energy that's being taught, or the energy with which all of the people that you've named are teaching, the teaching themselves, they're very much alive. And they awaken something inside of you each time that you read them that cuts through the noise, that cuts through the mask, that allows you to tap into what's true for you. And if I take it back to where we started, in some ways is actually giving you the capacity to develop your intuition, the capacity to develop discernment and to understand yourself. And the teacher themselves doesn't actually need to be alive to do that. Their writings are actually holding the frequency of where they got to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I'm an interesting experiment in this because I wasn't spiritual at all 6 years ago. I wasn't really religious. I didn't have that upbringing. And as I started getting into spirituality out of necessity, we've talked about that in previous podcasts. I started being pulled into the teachings of Jesus almost inexplicably and pulled into some of his reading teachings like the Sermon on the Mount, which which I've read so many times. And every time I read that, and I'm not a Christian, I don't come from that background. There's something about the words, the way they're laid out, the message, it just penetrates deeper and deeper into me. And I feel the vibration of the frequency. And it's almost inexplicable. But the way you've described it, there's more to these than just words. There's an energy, and that energy is real.
That sounds like an energy that's cutting you straight to what's true.
Yes.
You know it to be true. Yeah. Which really cuts through the noise of what's out there right now, for sure.
So, Jacqueline, I'm assuming you'd also see yourself as a spiritual teacher, but I'll let you answer that. But in it, how do you see your role as a teacher, and what is your gift to the world?
Ooh. Oh, huh. Um, I almost need to swallow and take a step back for a second. Um, the answer to that question, um, it's probably very different today than it would have been a few years ago or even a year ago. And I don't know if I see myself as a spiritual teacher. I know that I know that I have come here to be a teacher of some kind, for sure. Um, what is my gift to the world? Hmm. I'm probably going to answer this in a really roundabout way, so bear with me for a sec.
Mhm.
What I've come to really understand about what it means to be a teacher is that my primary responsibility is to my own growth and my own learning, which means that my job, above and beyond any other, or my responsibility above and beyond any other, is to learn how to be with all of me, which means how to sit with, be with, breathe with the parts of me that lie beneath all of the masks that I've worn throughout my life, whether I knew I was wearing them or I wasn't. And learning how to unconditionally love every aspect of myself, the good, the bad, the ugly, the even uglier, and find a way to be able to meet myself with absolute compassion. And I say that because my belief is that our jobs, or again, our responsibilities as teachers, is to be able to hold a frequency that is in such deep alignment with our truth and who we are, in connection with God, nature, spirit, whatever it is that you want to refer to that as. For me, it's God. In connection with something bigger than just me, such that when anybody comes to spend time with me, my ability to hold a mirror back to them that's big enough to hold all of them is present. And that can't be present if I can't look in the mirror and see all of me.
Why is that true?
Because as long as my blind spots are present, I'm not being compassionate with all of me.
Mm.
And if that's true, then I can't be compassionate with all of you. So, any places where my ego is showing up and is in the way, any place where I'm in service of you in order to avoid being with a part of me, I'm blocking you from being able to experience all of you in my presence. So maybe I'll explain that a little bit differently. I got to a place as a teacher where something really interesting happened for me. The world sort of aligned to give me time and space, and I took a step back from most of the roles that I was fulfilling as teacher, guide, mentor, whatever you want to call it. And what happened during that time was I actually got to see all of the places that I wasn't looking at for myself. And I got to go really deep and swim in the really deep waters of my own experience and go and retrieve parts of me that I had relegated into the shadows. And in so doing, my ability to now show up has really shifted and grown. I think over time, that will continue to happen. I don't think that we talk about Buddha as a teacher or Jesus as a teacher, and we look at them and they are enlightened beings, or that's what we hold them as being. In this human body of mine, I don't know if I ever reach enlightenment. What I do know for certain, as I've watched my path up until now, is that I will continue to learn and to grow. And as I continue to learn and to grow and to see parts of myself that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to see, my ability to hold a mirror up for the people that are around me gets stronger and stronger, and that mirror gets bigger and bigger, you know, and as that happens, my ability to clear out fear and anything connected to ego becomes more possible, which then creates a vibrational frequency that invites those that are around me to align with themselves in a similar way. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think, and it's really interesting that you brought up the names Jesus and the Buddha. And I think one of the things that we observe from them is that they seem to come from this place of unconditional love, which allowed them to be fully compassionate, which is that's just something you described. Is that a vibrational frequency? Is that what we're talking about? Like coming to that place where that's our frequency of consciousness that allows that at the pinnacle of it all, if we aim to get there, that's what we can do, unconditionally love everything without any of our own stuff getting in the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the ultimate.
Yeah. And the
And
spiritual teachers, the path is someone on the path, somewhere on that path to try to achieve that.
100%. As we were sort of talking about the idea of doing a podcast on teaching, I asked a group of, in the past I would say students, I would say now, I asked a group of friends who are all walking with me, what being a teacher, if they were to look back on their lives and actually speak to the qualities that showed up in people that stood out as teachers to them, what would they be? And I wrote everything that they spoke down, but it could be boiled down to 2 or 3 lines. It didn't matter whether these people were referring to a second grade teacher, a sports coach, a spiritual teacher, a partner, a friend. They all said the same thing. In this person's presence, I felt unconditional love. I felt belief in me. I felt seen.
Yeah. And I want, so so I was listening. You've just gone through this process you just described as like you've had this opportunity to step away from teaching and fully see yourself even more than you had before and see these parts of you that you've been hiding. Can you, do you see now in the role of the teacher how you've expanded to be able to be more in that frequency of unconditional love. Can you see the difference in your teaching and how you relate to people from that experience?
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%. Because to be able to recognize, in being able to recognize and own my own blind spots, the opportunity to be able to shine a brighter light that not only highlights blind spots, but that actually creates an opportunity of, or an energy of pure accept. We all have them. We
Mm.
all have blind spots.
We're human.
And we spend our lives using everything that we can to hide them from everybody else. But in that, not only are we not tapping into the depths and breadths of our own beauty, but we're also not actually seeing each other. And so, does it shift my teaching? Does it shift what it shifts is the way I be in the world, which in my experience thus far, it's given me the ability to create more space for people to be who they are, as I've created more space for me to be in acceptance of who I am. Yeah.
Beautiful. Why don't we take a break here?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. So we left off talking about blind spots. And I know, Chris, that in your work, you work a lot with blind spots. And I know that I've heard you refer to them as character defects. And I've seen how much you owning your blind spots has really shifted and helped you grow. I would love it if you would talk a little bit about that with our audience.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think so much of the work that I find myself doing started on myself, but now with clients and others is I'll just categorize it as the shadow work. Like what what are these rejected parts of myself or others that we've not looked at and not integrated that in essence are driving a lot of our activities and refer to them as like, our defects of character, the things we're doing, like needing to control things or procrastination, things like that. And they're generally fear driven and they're generally delivered by limiting beliefs. And without getting into that, just the process of looking at all those things, shining the light on them, understanding them, accepting them, loving them, integrating them, the change it's had in me and the change that I've seen it had in others from a spiritual perspective is you recognize, wait, I had all these blind spots that I was totally unaware of from my childhood, from whatever happened. So does everybody else. We're all human. And now because I've spent so much time looking at it with myself and others, I can see the blind spots in others and I don't judge them. I just acknowledge them. And more as time goes on, I look right through those blind spots in everybody. I look through people's egos and persona, and all I see the God within you that's the God within me. We're all just the same, and we've all just gone through these different paths that has put this layer on top of us. It's not really us, but I see more and more everyone for just the pure individual consciousness that they are. And all I have is empathy to help them get through whatever they need to go through because it's hard work.
Yeah. We were in our conversation yesterday about this. We were talking, and one of the things that really came out was this idea that as we step into a place of being able to take what we've relegated into the shadows and bring them out into the light and find a way back into wholeness, with those rejected parts of ourselves and meet ourselves compassionately, what we actually have the capacity to do is to be able to meet the fear that shows up in our presence, let's say through somebody trying to defend or attack, and actually go see through that and recognize that that's just a scream for love.
Yeah.
And so our capacity to be able to allow the drama to show itself without having any reaction to it, then creates an opportunity for nervous systems to begin to attune to a different energy. So what I mean by that is if in my presence you move into a place of defensiveness or attack, if I can actually own my shadow and recognize, oh, wait, this is just your shadow screaming, then rather than screaming back or attacking you, I can create space for you to be. And without the attack back, what happens is you then move to attune to my nervous system rather than me attuning to yours and creating more drama. So, in essence, what we're actually doing is by shifting, as you would speak, our consciousness, what we're doing is we're actually creating, we're tapping into peace. And we're inviting peace in every interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that word, like the attack is a cry for love. And when we can shift our consciousness and be in that spot and someone's attacking me, I can be like, I can just look at him, brother, I feel your pain. You're attacking me, but I know you're asking for love. And if I can hold the space, I can love you through it. And that will change the world.
And I think one of the pieces that you just spoke that's so powerful, or actually maybe it's not even what you spoke, but it was in the frequency of what you spoke, is that the only way that we have the ability to do that for each other as human beings is because we've been there ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, this whole idea of being a teacher is not, here I sit on this pedestal and look up to me. It's actually here I've walked. I've walked through this shit. And because I've walked through it, I can feel with you. And in feeling with you and maybe breathing with you, you can begin to see something a little bit different than what you see in this moment when you're in it. There's this beautiful quote that I read the other day, and it said, I can't actually remember the exact words, so I'm gonna bastardize them as I tend to do. But it was, for a caterpillar, the caterpillar at the end of having eaten as much as it can possibly eat sees its life as ending. The master sees a butterfly. And I think in many ways that actually defines or explains a lot about what it means both to be a teacher and a student. When we're in the midst of our turmoil, we see everything falling apart. The role of a teacher is to reflect back the mirror that says, you're becoming. And I know what it feels like to fall apart. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And and the interesting thing about our world is when, there's a lot more caterpillars than there are butterflies. And when the caterpillar starts feeling itself falling apart and going into the cocoon, if they ask other caterpillars what's happening, all the other caterpillars it's doom and gloom and feel sorry for it and whatnot, and it doesn't help. But if they can find that butterfly, somebody who's done it already, the butterfly will say, well, perfect. You don't know what's about to happen to you. It's going to be hard, but what waits on the other side of you is just pure magic. And it's not a coincidence. Like it's almost definitional of what a saint is. A saint is someone who has found great joy through immense suffering. That's the definition of it. And that's what a butterfly ultimately is.
Yeah, but we've killed most of the saints that have ever lived through history.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah.
They threaten the experience of the caterpillars enough that
Well,
we can.
imagine being a caterpillar and someone coming to you and saying, "Actually, I'm going to be okay. I'm about to turn into a butterfly." You're like, "You're not going to turn into that. What are you talking about? You're crazy." And now you're making all these other people think we're going to become butterflies. Well, we're going to lock you up and throw away the key.
Yeah.
That's our human nature. Um, okay, I want to switch gears here for a bit. Um, Coming back to what you first asked me about the need, why is there such a need for spiritual teachers now? One of the things I've observed is that the wellness space is really growing rapidly. It's a whole different dimensions. Are we getting the spiritual teachers that we need right now? Is that happening?
Well, if I was to really live what I teach, I would say we're getting exactly what we need right now. Um, and I think a part of it is we're getting what we need so that we can figure out that it's not actually what we need. Um,
The paradox.
the wellness space is growing tremendously right now, and I think in a lot of ways, it's growing in a funky way. Um, because the wellness space, in so many ways, is about wanting to feel better, and a space where we can take ourselves out of ourselves so that we can feel other than we actually feel. So we move into, the retreat space or different workshops or going to see different practitioners so that we can feel better. And as one of my teachers would say, it's not about learning how to feel better. It's actually to get better at feeling. When I think about the wellness space and spiritual teachers, what I would say is that um, there's a lot of wounded healers. And I say that with a tremendous amount of love because I think that I too um, entered this space in that way.
Me too.
Yeah. And and we, when we begin to learn, we begin to see ourselves differently, we begin to grow. I think there's almost this there's an impetus to then go and share everything that we've learned because it made a difference in our lives. And that's a beautiful part of being a human being. But it also is a very uh, it's a very beautiful. I can't quite find the word that I'm looking for, but it's a really beautiful way to actually bypass
Right.
having to be with ourselves and go deeper. As long as I'm in service of you, I don't have to be looking at me. And I think a lot of what the wellness space is people who have been touched by something who now want to share it and haven't necessarily done the depth of their work yet.
And that's it starts. It's a beautiful thing in that they want to share it. And in fact, I even say that working with others is like a necessary condition for healing in general. That's part of it. And I wonder, like, I think all healers are effectively start out as wounded healers. It's almost not, maybe not all, but a great majority of them. What differentiates those that then can move past that? I think that stage where we've all been to, where it's like, okay, I've got this gift now. And I remember when I first started practicing Kundalini yoga, God, I couldn't wait to share it with the world, because of the changes I was having within me. Um, and I suppose I could have stopped there and said, I've got this now, and kept going. And so what gets people past just being the wounded healer to the healer?
Hmm.
I'm asking that right.
Well, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to ask that. And I'm not sure that I have an answer for you. I can I can speak to you a little bit from my own experience and say that there comes a point, I think, no, I know, there comes a point in our work where being in service of others no longer feeds or nurtures us in the way that it once had, and that there's a deeper longing that shows itself, and it's a longing for connection with the sacred, both within us and in nature, in God, in whatever. And I think it's a stage that we must go through to then come back to once again be in service, but from a place of wholeness and connectedness, rather than being driven from our own wounds. And I don't think that any of this process is actually a very conscious process. I was not conscious that what I was doing as a teacher was also masking my own pain. I wasn't conscious of it at all. I had only the best of intentions in my work. It's only when I stepped away or was called away that I was able to actually recognize that there was deeper work for me to do, and that my primary connection needed to be with the sacred, right, and with myself before it was with anyone else.
Yeah, in a sense, what I hear you saying is there's this, we start with our inner work, and then we hear a call to share it with others. And hopefully we feel the call to come back, because it's not the outer work that ultimately makes us a spiritual teacher. It's the inner work, because the inner work is raising our vibrational frequency, our consciousness, whatever we want to call it, our connection. It's the inner work that's elevating us higher, not the outer work. And we can share that along the way. We can vibrate that. We can pull people up with us. But if we've abandoned the inner work for the outer work, we get stuck at the wounded healer, because there's just another aspect of our ego now that's taken us over, but from a slightly different place. 100%. But it's still now ego driven.
100%. And I think that with that, the response to step into the role of teacher is a very it carries a tremendous amount of responsibility. And we see how, not all of them, but so many of the people that we as society put up on these pedestals, they fall right off their pedestals, because the role of the teacher is not to be held on a pedestal. The role of a teacher is to be a mirror, to actually be that which reflects you back to you. So as a student, which I am often, as I enter the space to be with a teacher, the question I have to ask myself is the mirror big enough for me to grow into myself? Is it accurate? Am I experiencing me at a deeper and deeper level in your presence? Because if I am, then you're a teacher for me. But if I step into your space and you tell me who and how and what I'm supposed to do and be in order to achieve a certain level of enlightenment, then you're not a teacher for me. And I think that we really need to be helping people to see that a teacher is not necessarily somebody who gives you a group of tools, of how-tos, of to-dos, but actually a teacher often is somebody who reflects you back to you and shows you things you might not actually want to see in yourself.
Yeah. I guess that that defines why this whole space is such a challenge in a way, because the people that are coming into it looking for something new are very much still in self and ego, and not wanting to feel, you know, that not wanting to see the reflection fully yet. They might not be ready for it, as well as they may be attracted to a teacher from where they are that has tremendous social media presence, lots of likes, followers, all sorts of this fame. Now that looks like what I want, versus the spiritual teacher they actually need doesn't have any of that, but they have a frequency and a vibration that if that person would come with them and close their eyes, they would feel it. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in the story of, one of the greatest spiritual teachers we know, he only had 12 disciples and he was effectively killed 3 years into his teaching career. I mean, it's not that sort of setting the stage that this is not a place that's going to attract those that are needing healing because they don't know what they're looking for.
I think that's changing over time. I think more and more, there's more and more of us that are waking up and recognizing that it's time to take responsibility. I think in a lot of ways, when I look at who and what our biggest teacher is today, I would turn us back to our nervous systems.
Yes.
And learning how to develop mastery over our nervous systems is one of the deepest teachers that we can actually tap into. Learning how to tap into the wisdom of our breath, which, Eckhart Tolle says is the best teacher you'll ever have. I think more and more people are interested and willing to do this work. And, one of my teachers said to me a long time ago, the way that you'll know that you're living your dharma or your purpose is when you start to ruffle lots of feathers, which is exactly what you're speaking to when you're talking about Jesus, or you're talking about most of the people through history that we look to now as teachers, that we somehow needed to quiet either through death or jail or by, defaming or whatever else. Teachers challenge. Teachers challenge us to be the very best versions of ourselves because they see us. And the invitation is to see ourselves, which is it's not always it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
It's terribly hard. And as we step more and more into that space in ourselves, we recognize that all of our desires in the outside world don't even hold a candle to the adventure that can happen inside as we come home to ourselves. There's nothing I would rather be doing. But it's like climbing Everest.
Well, in a sense, too, like you're expanding that, because it's not only does the teacher help us to see ourselves, but they also help us see the lies of our society. And that sounds harsh, but that's the one thing they all had common. And they at the time they're all looked at counterculture and revolutionaries, because they're pointing out exactly that. What you're looking for is within. The only real authority is within and up. It's not out there. And what you're worshiping, the false idols that you worship, and you're going to worship something. And if you're not worshiping the God of your understanding or the divine within you, you're going to be worshiping money. You're going to be worshiping fame. You're going to be worshiping an organization. You're going to be worshiping something. And so it's so threatening to the power structure and society when the real teacher begins to emerge and starts calling it out. Which,
No, go ahead.
Which it's almost leading me to ask this question: does, this concept of teacher versus a spiritual teacher. Does a spiritual teacher actually need any students to be a spiritual teacher?
No.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely not. The spiritual teacher needs to be doing their own work to be able to vibrate in the frequency that is in such alignment that in their presence, anybody that comes close to them is invited into a different space in themselves. I think students show up when they're ready. But inevitably, our work is to align. And the beauty of you and I is that we get to call each other into alignment and notice when we're off, which makes us really lucky.
Yeah.
So if you were to offer our audience a thought as we were sort of coming to the end of our podcast, what would you share?
I'll tune into the thread of our conversation, which has been profound. I'll end where we started. First of all, is that the need to tap into our inner resources and to connect with our intuition. It's greater than it's been in my lifetime. I can't speak for other lifetimes, but it feels profound. So the age of Aquarius is upon us, and I think we can almost all agree that we feel it. It's really difficult to know what's true and what's false. And to do that, it's not about outsourcing that process to someone we call a teacher or an authority. We have to take responsibility for it ourselves. It's up to us to make that connection and raise our vibration. But there are teachers out there that can help. And your intuition will guide you to where those things are. You'll feel it. Watch for the way they act. Watch for the way they interact with the world. Look for people who said, I would like to be like them. And allow them to take the role of teacher for you as long as it serves you, but don't attach to them. And find your way to higher discernment and higher intuition through this process. And it will serve you well. And it will give you what you're really looking for, which is ultimately peace with yourself and peace with your fellows.
That's beautiful.
How about yourself, Jacqueline? What's your thoughts as we close?
The work is inner work. And while that might feel sometimes like a lonely path, the opportunity to align with other people is always present. Find a community, find a group of friends, find a group of people that you are willing to be vulnerable with and walk with them. You don't need to walk this alone. In fact, I don't know that we can truly walk this alone. We are being invited into a different space than we've ever been in before. And we need to be gathering together in order to be able to move forward. Trust your intuition and do the work. Take responsibility for yourself and begin to look inside and do your work. You won't be disappointed. And I think with that, it's time to close.
Right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, on Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living.
Tune in every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio for more real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and the masculine. You will learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow, and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
For more information or to connect with us personally, visit theway-healing.com. That's theway-healing.com.